Okay, picture this. Close your eyes for just a second. Imagine you're created in a single instant, fully grown right this very second. But there's a massive twist. You're floating in mid-air. Total darkness. Absolutely no sound. No breeze against your skin. You can't even feel your own limbs. Zero memories, zero sensory experiences. With literally all of the physical world stripped away, do you still know that you exist?
I know, it's a super heavy question, but here's the crazy part. Over 600 years before the Western world even started tackling this, a total genius in Central Asia named Avicenna answered it with absolute certainty. His answer? A resounding yes. Even without sight, sound, or physical feeling, you would still know for sure that your independent mind exists. It perfectly captures the core mystery of human consciousness. This is known as the floating man thought experiment, and it's actually just one tiny piece of a much larger, literally world-changing puzzle that we're going to dive into today.
So that puzzle is the Kitab al-Shifa. Now you might hear the English translation, the Book of Healing, and think, wait, wasn't Avicenna a really famous doctor? Is this just a medical textbook? Surprisingly, no. Despite the title, this massive 1,000-year-old, 18-volume encyclopedia contains almost zero physical remedies. Instead, Avicenna designed the whole thing to cure a totally different disease, and that is the disease of ignorance. He literally wanted to cure the human soul by explaining, well, everything in reality.
Let's be real. To build a master guide to all of reality, you have to be pretty spectacular, and Avicenna absolutely was. Just look at this timeline. By age 10, he'd already memorized the entire Quran. By 18, he was such an accomplished doctor that he was literally curing royal rulers, which earned him access to their super-secret libraries. But the real game-changer was this epiphany he had in a crowded market. He bought a cheap book that suddenly made all the ancient Greek philosophy he'd been struggling with just click right into place. That sparked his ultimate mission. So by his mid-30s, while literally fleeing political enemies and surviving house arrest, which is wild, he started writing this complete encyclopedia of all human knowledge.
So how exactly do you organize an 18-volume book about, well, everything, without getting completely lost in the weeds? You build it like a massive skyscraper. Avicenna broke the whole universe down into 4 distinct steps or floors. His thinking was, you can't just jump straight into asking why the universe exists until you understand math. You can't understand math until you understand the physical world. And you definitely can't understand anything physical until you know how to actually think clearly. So in this explainer, we're going to go floor by floor through his work to keep things perfectly organized.
Let's start at the ground level. Floor 1. Logic, the toolkit of truth.
See, Avicenna didn't view logic as some boring homework assignment. He saw it as the base operating system for the human brain. Think about it. If your mental software has bugs, every conclusion you try to run is going to crash. You become super vulnerable to getting fooled or emotionally manipulated. Take a look at a sound argument here. Basically, clean, crash-free software. Iron is a metal, metals expand when heated, therefore iron expands. Makes total sense, right? But then look at the flawed one. Dogs have 4 legs, cats have 4 legs, therefore cats are dogs. I mean, it sounds totally ridiculous when you spell it out like that, but Avicenna warned that everyday people make logic errors exactly like this all the time if they don't have this mental toolkit. If your mental glasses are dirty, the whole world is going to look blurry.
Moving on up, Floor 2, Physics, exploring the natural world.
So once those mental glasses are perfectly clean, we can ascend to the next level. And it is absolutely incredible to realize that his scientific observations here were literally hundreds of years ahead of Western Europe. While he was out hiking in the mountains of Central Asia, Avicenna stumbled across fossilized seashells embedded high up in the rocky cliffs. Now, instead of just shrugging it off, he applied that sharp logic toolkit. He correctly deduced that areas of dry land today must have been covered by deep oceans millions of years ago. He figured out that tectonic forces pushed seabeds upward and that wind and water slowly carved out those mountains over time through erosion. Guys, he was literally describing modern geology way back in the year 1020. How cool is that?
But for Avicenna, physics wasn't just about rocks and erosion, it was also about biology and life itself. He defined the soul as basically the driving engine of life, and he categorized it beautifully here. You've got plants, which have a vegetative soul that just allows them to grow, eat, and reproduce. Then animals have an animal soul, which adds on the ability to move and feel physical sensations. But then you get to the rational soul, and that's us. Humans possess this unique biological engine that allows us to think abstractly, reason, and grasp universal truths. Okay, so here's the really crucial part. How this rational soul connects right back to that floating man thought experiment we started with. Avicenna argued that this rational soul, your actual consciousness, is a completely independent reality. Your physical body, it's basically just a physical suit that your mind happens to wear. And this is a massive historical reveal because it directly predates René Descartes' famous I think, therefore I am by over 600 years. Avicenna was out there logically proving the independent mind centuries before it became the bedrock of modern Western philosophy. No way, right?
All right, moving up again. Floor 3, mathematics, bridging the physical and the invisible.
Now, for Avicenna, mathematics wasn't about, memorizing dry formulas for some test. He saw it as pure structural beauty. To him, math was the bridge that actually connected the physical, tangible things we touch to the invisible world of ideas. He broke math down into 4 classical arts: geometry, arithmetic, astronomy, and music. And he wasn't just theoretical, he was incredibly hands-on. Take astronomy, for instance. He actually spotted the transit of Venus, which is when the planet Venus passes directly across the face of the sun, and he did it using custom-made instruments that he literally designed himself. That single observation proved that Venus was closer to Earth than the sun was.
Did you notice how music was included on that math floor? It's kind of surprising, right? Avicenna mathematically analyzed musical frequencies and scales, and he wasn't studying it just to write a catchy tune. He realized that certain mathematical sound frequencies could literally calm an anxious mind or lower a racing heart. He used math to prove that the universe is built on this deep underlying harmony, and he actually advocated for using music as a legitimate therapeutic tool to heal emotional and psychological stress. And finally, we arrive at the top. Floor 4, metaphysics, the summit of existence.
Everything we've covered so far brings us to this grand finale, where we tackle those deep, late-night questions that keep us all awake. Like, why does anything exist at all, rather than just nothing? To answer that, Avicenna introduced a distinction that completely reshaped philosophy forever: essence versus existence. Let's think about a unicorn. You know its essence perfectly well, right? By definition, it's a horse with a spiral horn on its head. But just because you can define its essence perfectly doesn't mean it actually has existence in the real physical world. Now compare that to a coffee cup. That cup has both an essence and physical existence. What Avicenna proved was that for almost everything in the universe, what a thing is and the fact that it actually exists are two completely separate things.
Because of this distinction, literally everything around us is what he called a contingent existent. Think about it. You wouldn't exist if your parents hadn't met. Mountains wouldn't exist without tectonic plate shifting. Everything relies on some external cause. But Avicenna used his logic toolkit to argue that an infinite chain of falling dominoes is just impossible without a very first push to start it all. So his crucial point was that there must be what he called a necessary existent. This is an ultimate reality whose very definition, whose actual essence is existence itself. He logically defined this uncaused first push, this necessary foundation of absolutely all reality, as God.
Let's look at the big picture. A 1,000-year legacy, healing the human mind.
So we've reached the top floor of his skyscraper, but the story definitely doesn't end there. The legacy of this monumental work literally healed the human mind all across the globe. When the Book of Healing was translated into Latin in the 12th century, it hit Western Europe like an intellectual thunderbolt. It brilliantly bridged the gap between ancient Greek philosophy, science, and faith. It deeply influenced giant philosophical thinkers like Thomas Aquinas and Maimonides. It became foundational reading at universities like Oxford and Paris for hundreds of years. Really, the massive ripple effect of this single encyclopedia proves that without Avicenna, the modern scientific revolution and the entire European Renaissance might have looked drastically different.
So you might be wondering, why does a 1,000-year-old book still matter to us today? Well, because as these core themes show us, knowledge is profoundly interconnected. We really shouldn't be isolating science from art, or math from physics. Plus, critical thinking is absolutely essential for our mental health. Honestly, sharp logic is still the perfect cure for today's chaotic, misinformation-heavy world. And finally, amidst all our glowing screens and constant daily distractions, Avicenna's work reminds us to just pause and appreciate the quiet, enduring miracle of our own conscious mind.
Which brings us right back to where we started. I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought to chew on. If you were completely stripped of your screens, your environment, and all sensory distractions right now, what remains of the real you? Avicenna gave us his incredibly powerful answer a whole millennium ago. Now it's your turn to explore that for yourself.
Please like and subscribe.